dragging you back in. We're trying to keep track of your progress because there's two things obviously front and center for us is the $50 million recovery grants and the capital money. We talked to, as you know, Senator Clarkson, I talked to Megan Sullivan and Jessica this morning, got a little bit more information, which we'll share with the committee at the end of the hearing. There's a memo out up until now. There's been preciously little on that $90 million out there. I think like one paragraph and what Joan was able to tell us last time she was in. But now we have a little bit more meat on the bone, not enough to my satisfaction, but everybody's saying we want to work together to get to a product that could work. But so let's try and focus on the recovery grants. My understanding, and I'm going to turn it over to you very quickly, but that it's your intent, at least the last time we heard, is to use pretty much the guidelines that you developed for the $10 million in H315 for this $50 million the governor is proposing. There were some statutory requirements, and then there were guidelines that I guess 10 days after the governor signed the bill, so he signed it on Saturday, or let it go into effect on Saturday, so you probably have until the following Monday to present the legislature with the guidelines. The sooner you can share with us what those guidelines might look like, the better off we're all going to be. I imagine that even though, as far as we know, the Senate Appropriations Committee is planning on addressing the budget, which will include this issue, whatever they put in there will be a work in progress that will continue to evolve over the next couple of weeks before the budget gets sent to the governor. But so the sooner we know what you're doing, the sooner we'll be able to give you our feedback on it. So that's setting the stage for your testimony this morning, if that helps.
Okay. Sure. So I just have to recall with the on H315, we have 10 days to issue guidelines. I think that brings us to next week sometime. And I wasn't aware, maybe I should be aware. Does that mean it first goes to the legislature? I didn't think so, but
I don't have the bill in front of me, but my guess is that maybe I assume it said that you would present those to the legislature. No, I don't think it has to get pre-approved by the legislature, but I do think that it has to be delivered to the legislature. And if we didn't require it be delivered, it would be just a matter of us making a phone call. Can we see them? So
right. So a work in progress. I mean, we're not holding up anything. We are working to figure out how to operationalize all the parameters that are set forth in the statute. And so we have to do that so that we could get that to the systems people so that they could actually create a system. And right now we are working to get an ETA of what that would be, because I understand from the statute that the guidelines need to include the timeline for when we're going to be able to accept applications. And so right now, that is our biggest challenge, is understanding how long it'll take to do the system implementation. And we are working toward the, exactly what the methodology will be. The statute spells out just about everything, but there's obviously calculations that we're going to need to do, and we want to figure out how to best do them. So a lot is happening simultaneously. So it's not just the guidelines. We also are finalizing requirements for the system, so the system folks could tell us how long it's going to take for them to implement this. And as soon as those are finalized, then we'll publish them. We'll have to translate them, and we will be doing outreach and webinars and
Right.
all the rest of it. I mean, there's guidelines and then there's FAQs. I don't think the guidelines will be as detailed as, if you recall, the first and second time we had very detailed FAQs. So, yeah, I mean, we're working on it. I don't really know what else to say. You are correct. I think it would be our preference, and it's probably more prudent to use the same methodology for the 50 million, only because each time we go back to the drawing board, it costs more money, right? So 5%, I think we have up to 5% in each 315, just to give you a frame of reference. Up to 5% is $500,000. In that $500,000, there's systems, there's ATS, there's translation. I think there's even technical assistance was thrown in there, which I'm not sure we're going to be able to do. So a lot of expectation. So we're working through all of that, and so that we could deliver within the timeline given us within the statute.
So here's the, in my mind, some of the interplay between the legislature and the executive branch on this. And it sort of shows, I think, in some ways, the importance of somewhat a collaborative effort on these guidelines. If it's the intent for administrative reasons or otherwise to use the same guidelines for the $10 million as you do for the $50 million, and I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination we've made a decision on that $50 million yet, but if we feel uncomfortable where things are going with the $10 million guidelines, we might want to write new guidelines that accompany the $50 million. So one example that I know we can maybe talk a little bit about is what the auditor has brought to our attention, which you may have heard his testimony or seen his memo. And if you haven't seen his memo, I'd certainly get that to you, dealing with the concept of tax loss. I mean, I think people sort of knew what they were saying in terms of tax loss, but tax loss can be, it's not defined, and it can be, it can result in inequitable or unintended consequences depending upon what those guidelines say. And one of the major examples that was given is you could have somebody who was profitable in 2020 that has a significant tax loss that they're carrying over from 2016, and all of a sudden on their bottom line of their 2020 return, they show a tax loss even though they haven't been adversely impacted by COVID. So I would think that the guidelines could allow for, to say that in those circumstances, we're going to somehow ask a question, is this the result of a loss carry forward from previous years, to not wind up with that unintended result. So that's what we want to, those are the kinds of things that we would want to see in guidelines. And if you have a different opinion, then we might want to sort of make it clearer in the next bill that we pass that was not our intent.
Right. Doug talked about it as net operating income.
And once upon a time, the statute actually, I think, said that, but that's not what was passed. So.
No, I know it's. I know.
I mean, you tell me. I mean,
I don't necessarily. I don't necessarily think we can go so far as to turn it into net operating thing, but we can.
Well, yeah. I mean, suffice it to say, the way the statute is written, H315 is very difficult to implement. Having said that, what does that mean? I don't mean difficult just for us. I mean, like, applicants are probably going to hate us. I'm just warning you, all those emails you're going to get, because we will need to see 2019 tax returns to see if they always have a loss, or in the case that was cited, did they take a tax loss carry forward? We cannot do a deep dive on every single applicant to start doing their, reconstructing cash flow. you
No,
know.
I'm not
But what we're
suggesting
going to
anything.
do is we will probably ask for P&Ls from March of 2020 to March or April of 21 to see the COVID impact.
Right.
This is the difficulty with everyone thought that we were so awry by doing it on revenue. Now we're going to do it on net, and then there's other difficulties. So we have to either live with the difficulties presented by each methodology or not do a program. I mean, it really starts getting very, very difficult. I know the auditor has been auditing us since January, and after 3 months and looking at 57 applications, they were able to determine that. But just think about how long that takes to analyze 57 applications. So, and we got thousands. So anyway, that's all the past, right? We did it on revenue. There are downfalls of doing that. Now we're doing it on tax loss as written in statute, tax loss. So we're going to have to request additional information from each and every applicant
Well,
to show COVID impact, and to show.
Let's just look at this one example, and it may be instructive, illustrative. There are obviously a lot of variations, but my understanding is if you're taking a carry forward loss on a 2020 return, it's on the 2020 return. You have to put that down, that you're carried forward and loss from previous years. So you don't have to look at 2019. And when the statute says tax loss, which was an attempt to get around the wide open, what we felt was ill-defined House version of economic loss, whatever that meant. Maybe we should have defined tax loss a little bit more specifically, but I think it's fair to say that tax loss meant tax loss as it was incurred in 2020, not necessarily all previous years. So I think you're well within your right to say, for as an example, if you got a 2020 return that showed a tax loss that was generated primarily because of a carry forward loss that's on that 2020 return, you're saying that doesn't meet our definitions. And you can say that within the guidelines. And I think you're given some discretion within the guidelines. And it's not even a rule, it's a guideline. You have the authority to pass guidelines defining those terms. So all I'm saying, if you disagree with us on that, fine, but just keep us posted so we can know what to do, at least for the next round.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally within your, ability to define something different, and that's great. And, that's fine. I just want to say that we do need to look at 2019 tax returns, and we do need to see P&L from both, because we want to make this as systematized as possible. What does that mean? We want the system to do the calculations, and the system isn't smart enough to go into everybody's individual tax return to do that determination. So if that means it's going to change, then so be it. I think that, there's also a calculation that really the concern was that we don't duplicate benefit from what they've gotten from other. So what we're adding back in is their PPP that was forgiven.
Right.
I thought that was the most important determinant.
Right.
Not whether or not somebody is taking a tax loss. Then you would go into, what about depreciation? What about amortization that doesn't show up? Should we subtract that?
Right.
So, it's a variety of different things. We're mixing net income statements with cash flow statements. And I think we just have to bear in mind it's a grant program, and we're going to avoid duplication of benefit as much as possible. And if that's not good enough for the legislature, I guess we need to know that now, so we don't implement something like that.
I think we're on the same page of that. I think we want to avoid duplication of benefits. That's why we put that language in that allows you to adjust benefits based upon previous receipts, and what you said you were planning on doing that. And yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think the part of the program that I guess you're going to carry forward, where the first priority is people who've received nothing.
Correct. Those will be the easier ones to do, actually.
That's that's what we're
Yeah.
that's what we're hoping to get to. I mean, people can misread both of this committee, myself, and your intentions and all that, but I think all we've been struggling with is not that we're trying to deprive the bottom line amount that goes out, but just make it sure it goes to the neediest people. And that has the tension that we all see about trying to get the money out the door quickly and the simplicity of doing it with a simple formula. And, it's a balancing act. And, maybe the administration has chosen to lean more on one side than we have, but we're all trying to work towards the same goal, I think. Anyhow, well, I don't necessarily want to get too weedy, but if there comes a time in the next few days where you want to reach out to us and let us know what you're thinking about in terms of certain guidelines or things that are challenges for you and would like some feedback from us, we would welcome that opportunity.
Yeah. And Senator Rahm had a question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Senator Rahm.
Thank you. Well, Joan, you may have heard a little bit of the previous discussion before joining us, and I think it would not surprise you to hear that I'm just really worried about who's going to be at the end of the line again for business support. And I just wonder if you think $100,000 is enough to support a BIPOC business network, given what you heard, or how you see ACCD supporting that effort with greater personnel and resources.
Yeah, thank you. I think we reviewed this in-house with Susanna and others, right? And so I think initially they were proposing that this all lived at ACCD, and it felt incongruent to the way, like, we don't provide technical assistance, we use a technical assistance network. So our thought was, well, truly the consultant that gets hired should work with the BIPOC community, and the BIPOC community should determine what are the needs and how should this organization be governed, and not necessarily dictate that it has to be within state government, right? And I think that kind of message came across loud and clear, that BIPOC folks were not comfortable going to the slew of technical assistance providers that we have. I mean, in some cases they were comfortable, others they were not. So I think that is an attempt to address it. And I think it does need to be organized. It can't just be, okay, put a person in ACCD and it's going to solve everything, which is kind of how it felt when it was put together. The person, I think the legislation had something like, we were going to do everything from unconscious bias training to technical assistance, to grant program management. I mean, a lot of different things that for any non-BIPOC technical assistance, we would definitely, outsource that. So I think it falls in line with the way we outsource technical assistance. Whether it's enough money, I don't really know. I know they put a very small timeline on it, which we were curious about and pushed back on a little bit, because I know that we were worried that it's going to take time. Like, this person's going to have to convene folks, people have to discuss, deliberate what is the best way to serve the community. And I think House wasn't willing to give more time because they wanted to be responsive. So I think it was balancing the responsiveness with actually creating a product or a program that could actually be helpful, designed by the BIPOC community, not designed by somebody in state government. So I mean, that's kind of the feeling. And there was another thought in there that the agency of commerce somehow is responsible for contracting, when in fact, the BGS, AOT, it's many other agencies that have tremendous amounts of state contracts. It's a broader question. And so all of that needs to be examined. And Susanna I think the impetus was, well, let's get Susanna more fully staffed so that those types of policy determinations could be driven by that division, and then every other agency falls into place. So that's my feeling. I mean, what I did look into is some states have minority business development centers. We don't have that. And there's a minority business development agency in DC that actually funds some of them and creates grant opportunities, and we miss out on that. So let's not miss out on that. Let's get organized, get something together, figure out what the governance structure is, right? Like, I know that the feds, Darcy told me that way back when we were creating who was going to look after the women-owned business, and it was determined it was the Women's Business Center, Center for Women in Business Enterprise, everyone was in agreement. This way there was a concerted effort that this is where, folks need to go to get assistance. So I think it's okay. I think it's a start. Like, I don't know. I think it would be naive for everyone to think, oh, 100,000 is going to solve all the problems. It's not. We have to take steps and lay a foundation that could work, and that is going to get at exactly what the needs are without just thinking that the agency is going to be the salve all, just because it's written in statute. I find that really, I thought that. So I think we work together on a compromise.
Yeah.
I could just add, Joan, what I really appreciate about what you just said is, when you call something minority business development center or something like that, it's Googleable, right? Like, we need to know what people are searching for when they're asking for help. We need to understand the user experience and not sort of bury things or act like everybody should know where to go to get help. So I really appreciate that. And I know this is written in as a network to really honor what exists and what people might want. And we need to do focus groups and start collecting information on, like, where have people run into trouble trying to get help, especially if you're a new American. You can't get into all the nuance of this language. Like, you need to Google something and get a phone number and know that there's an interpreter on the other end of the line and get help, and that, like, how we get to that point is something I'd like to continue thinking about with you.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Randy, I believe Randy had a question. Randy, did I see your hand up before?
I'm sorry,
Well,
Senator
just a
Brock.
generalized question on the subject of development agency for these businesses. Are there other businesses that are white-owned that also are in the same economic situation, the end of the line situation, or the lack of knowledge as to who to go to and where to go? How would you deal with those businesses?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Senator Brock. And I think initially in the grant program, I remember there was an outcry from some of the small white male-owned businesses that had to have at least one employee, and the only exception to that rule were the women and minority-owned businesses. So there clearly are small businesses that really do get lost, right? But we do have the Small Business Development Center, and there are in the RDC network, and there are places that people can go. I think what we took to heart was we read through Curtis Reed's results of the survey, and in the survey, what was interesting, the good news was over 50% of the folks who needed financial help said they got help. So I felt like that was a good number. But the unfortunate commentary that came out was that some of the folks felt uncomfortable going to those SBDC and other kind of white managed, places. They didn't feel, I don't know if the words were welcome or that they felt like they didn't feel comfortable. So I think that, small businesses in general have a hard time, like, just approaching some things that are complex, right? But maybe wouldn't have that additional barrier of feeling uncomfortable, let's say. So, like, micro biz development had a program for the small businesses that are low to moderate income. So, I think there are many agencies that could help. It's just that in Vermont, there is no specified agency for BIPOC.
Right.
I don't know if I answered you,
How
but
many businesses are we talking about?
Well, that's the problem too. Since when you register your business, you're not asked for race, right, currently. And I know that the Secretary of State, I think, in the new business portal will be asking more race and ethnicity questions. And so it's hard to establish the baseline. I mean, that is the issue. I mean, people kept saying that we didn't do a good enough job, but I don't know what the comparison is, right? Like what would be. And so in order to measure that, we have to start collecting that. And I think there are efforts to do that with the business portal.
Any numbers provided in Curtis's report that would give you a clue as to what we're talking about?
I don't have that at the ready. I think that he utilized all of the people who checked off minority owned in the grant program, since he was one of the helpers in the outreach. So, and I just want to say, I think over 50% said they felt they got the financial help they needed, which again, I think is a good number. And there were others that had commentary that they didn't feel comfortable. So I think, just a general mode was, there needs to be more effort on making sure that there's help available.
So could I just pivot back to the beginning of this question, which is how are we going to be guiding the businesses that all businesses that still need help and in with this 50 million. So what we're looking at is really focusing on tax returns, looking at 2019. Any way you can continue to partner with the tax department, as you did very productively, Joan, in quickly analyzing, particularly for the hospitality industry, which is still, the lodging sector is still so heavily affected, and it's not getting the restaurant grants that the restaurant revitalization program is getting. Is there a way to continue to use that? What was it, 72 that help you through this? I know that was tax-based, but anyway,
Okay. Well, no, you bring up a really good point. And so just to go back a little bit in history, tax was enormously helpful. I'm not sure they're able to help this time around. Their help, though, again, it was based on revenue. It was the top line revenue that each of those entities reported on their rooms and meals tax. They did not do a deeper dive into tax returns. So if we're comfortable with doing revenue again, I'd say, yeah, let's have at it. But I do not think that they would be able to do what we did, which was the delving deeper in. The reason why they're able to do it is their system was able to calculate everything. And no one overestimates the revenue that they make because they're paying tax on the amount of that revenue.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I like the idea, but I think Craig's had enough of us. No, I'm only kidding.
Well, Craig may have had enough of you, but it is a really effective first sieve or first, the first funnel through which particularly those who collect trust taxes, like the lodging industry, could go through.
Are you asking this question based on, in other words, they could help with outreach or help with administration?
Well, I think tax department can always help with outreach because, of course, they touch everybody, and they touch all businesses. But I was thinking particularly as we try and look at industries that are still hurting, that, I mean, we all represent a lot of the hospitality industry because it's such a huge percent of our economy. At lodging in particular, particularly smaller lodging establishments, still had, still their revenue is still off there, and hopefully their taxes will reflect that. And they still have huge fixed costs.
Yeah, that's exactly who we had in mind when we designed this. Yep.
I know, and that is who we still need to continue to help. And I was just thinking if tax could continue to be a first set of eyes looking at some of these, so that because I know the challenge of the time it takes to review each one of these proposals. And so I was just trying to think of a first set of eyes that could review need based on tax information and then send it for further review. I was just thinking that was such a productive partnership. Why can't we use that in part?
I would love to. It's based on top line revenue. It's not based on the bottom line.
Yeah.
Can
I we can do that this time.
Joan, is there language that you've submitted to the Appropriations Committee that goes along with the request for $50 million in recovery grants?
Yeah, I think I thought someone was going to get that to you. We could send that to you.
Well,
It's
I had a conversation this morning about someone
okay.
sending it to me.
Yeah, on the 50 million, there's very little other than just to say it's economic recovery. But we could we can get that to you.
Okay, and do you have anything you want to say about the capital, or just leave it to let us follow up on the conversation we had this morning?
Yeah, well, I guess we want to ask the question of, if you have to give recommendations tomorrow, is that right? Is that what the
Probably we're going to be talking about all this tomorrow in committee, and we'll draft some sort of message to appropriations tomorrow afternoon. Yep.
Okay, so I guess the question is, what else should we provide to you to further that effort, right? It's $90 million over 3 years. Capital Investments Grants Program.
We have the memo. Senator Clarkson and I expressed some of our concerns about how it is being rolled out. So we're going to get that memo to the rest of the committee and talk about it tonight or tomorrow morning, and we can get you some further questions if we need that. I was just asking if you had something today you wanted to emphasize on that because you were at the dentist.
Yeah, so the emphasis really is that, even though there are 3 years to spend down the funds, the urgency is still now, because as we know, for large capital improvement projects, whether it's a repurposing of a building or an expansion or any type of capital investment, the permitting process is robust. It takes a long time, and not just permitting, but the pre-development process, the engineering, all of that could take 18 to 24 months, as we may know. So if we don't start now, we could potentially run the risk of not being able to spend down those funds, and that would be a bad outcome. So we do think there is urgency, even though this feels a lot more sane than the CRF funds. I think with longer term investments that you want to see returns for years to come in increased grand list values and job creation, retention, we want to start now. And it's not like we'd have to really drum up interest. There is already so many different projects that I'm sure all of you know about in your respective constituencies that are waiting to finish their projects. And the balancing act will be who is capable of actually taking these funds and, bringing it to fruition.
Without any guidelines yet, do we know for a fact that the federal government is treating this similar to the CARES funding with a different date? That if you,
of course we don't know. Of course we don't know. This is part of the challenge of the of all of this kind of ARPA money right now. But there is a nexus, right? As we know, before the pandemic, it was more expensive to build in Vermont and then try to get appraisal value that foots with the construction cost. And now even more so, as construction costs have doubled or tripled, or the ability to get help, all of that is increasing cost and timeline. So I think that we could make that case, and I think that is conversations that are going on to give feedback to Treasury about what we think should be accomplished with this.
Okay. I have two very quick small questions before I let you go. The Montreal Trade Office, is that, given the fact that the border's not even open yet, would it be an issue, do you think, to delay that money for 6 or 9 months and still do it for 2 years, but not do it starting July 1st?
Well, I mean, let me introduce you to the state's contracting process. I mean, it's going to take some time to get that executed. So I think the sooner we know about that, at least it's, available, that we could embark on the RFP process, contracting process, and the rest of it. So even if they end up not getting to work until January, at least we could spend that time, going through the paces to get the contractor on board. It's lengthy.
It's a 2-year contract as presented in 150,
Correct.
right? Okay. And then the question on, there's another question. Oh, on the expedited permitting, that $3 million, $750,000 a year. I just want to be clear, that's to hire additional staff because you expect a lot of projects to try and go forward now that they might not have to go through Act 250. Is that what the 750,000 a year is for?
So remember, not every project would be subject to Act 250 anyway. So to sort of set aside the exemption, it's really more about if we are successful in getting the capital investment program up and running, if we are successful with the water, wastewater, all these different broadband projects, housing, think about the queue that would form at the regulating agencies. So it's really about personnel for A&R, NRB, and fire safety. We don't want permitting backlog to, set our plans awry and then again jeopardize the usage of these kind of once in a lifetime funds because of permitting backlog.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We'll be in touch, and we're going to go to DOL.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Joan.
So we have Sarah Buxton and Senator Degree, and then we'll have Karen Horn after that. So we have heard very little about workforce development, at least in this stage of the discussions of the ARPA money. In 159, it seems like virtually all of the money is going to the state colleges. I think from my afternoon committee and this committee, we're hearing about all these issues about broadband needing people immediately, housing needing people immediately, other kinds of construction needing folks, and healthcare. And so I don't see much floating around despite all this money to try and get like internships, apprenticeships, or jumpstart those, or injecting more funds to get things going there. And so we have the two probably experts now in this area, and we want to know what the lay of the land is, how we're going to, just like Joan just got finished saying, she needs more staff to process these permits, and she doesn't want a bottleneck, so she's asking for $3 million. What are we going to do when we start putting these shovel-ready projects out there and we say we don't have anybody to do the work? So I don't know who wants to go first between you or Dustin, but you guys decide and just introduce yourself and welcome.
Sarah, why don't you fire it off?
You outrank me. I'll let you start.
Sure.
You are a senator and you get to keep your title. I'm just a lowly former rep.
Wow. I feel like I'm talking to 5 of the only 30 people that care that I used to be a senator. So that's okay. So for the record, Dustin Degree, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Labor. I think that the questions that you're bringing up, Mr. Chair, are timely and well I will say the department wholeheartedly supports the governor's plan to spend the ARPA money. And I think that when we look at the type of things that we were asked to provide and that the rest of the administration was asked to provide, the governor was very clear that he wanted to do things that really set a foundation and moved us forward without kind of tying us to further financial liabilities down the line. So when we see the infrastructure projects and the housing projects and the broadband, I think that those all fall under things that we need to set the foundation to rebuild our workforce. And I definitely think that there's work that we can do with what we have and what we're trying to do moving forward. And certainly, for the next few months, at least, I think Sarah can speak more directly to this. We're really moving into a reemployment phase in the department, trying to get folks who have been out of the workforce back in that might be more ready than we were, 12 or 18 months ago, when we were really trying to fit folks up to enter the workforce from the beginning. So I think we're happy to answer your questions. I think Sarah has some prepared testimony, and then we can kind of go from there and talk about what we can do moving forward.
Hey.
Sure.
Sarah.
Sarah Buxton, Director of Workforce Development with the Department of Labor. I provided a lengthy memo to you, but I won't read it because I know you're short on time and I can always be too wordy. So I put it on paper this time. I came prepared with a few things, and I want to make sure I don't lose track of your last question, Senator, about broadband weatherization, and then Senator's comment about healthcare, because I think I can speak to those. So I'm certainly prepared today to tell you about 159 as it is now. There's sections we support and sections we don't support. I just want to clarify that we've never testified on this bill at all, not in the House. No provisions have we been asked to weigh in or testify. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do that now. All of our workforce development conversations have happened in other bills, which feeds into your point, Senator, about weatherization, broadband, healthcare, et cetera. And so I can point to where some of those appropriations are and included some of that, but not all of that, because I recognized in the memo I didn't point out the current broadband investments in workforce. I can also give you a sense of in where those funding pieces are, where we've got some buckets of, we have a proposal for $500,000 that wasn't funded in the House version of the budget, but that may be really important for this committee to be aware of. I understand you've heard a lot of different proposals through the week, and I'm happy to kind of work through with that bucket of funds that the department had to support jobs development currently. We can talk through if some of the proposals might work in that bucket of funding. I also wanted to share with you what our expectation is with regard to federal funding coming down the pike, because it's not the first time we've been asked why workforce development isn't in the ARPA funding from the administration. And I can either jump to that or we can ease into that. But I did describe where the federal delegation has helped point me toward where we believe there will be significant investments in workforce development coming down in the next iteration of the jobs plan. And then if you are interested in any of the perspectives from the frontline staff about what the on the ground situation is right now with both job seekers and employers, it's changing week to week. And I'm sure you've heard some of that from some of the stakeholder representatives in the last week. But our team really is working both with job seekers and employers. And I think it's important that we not characterize their situation in the context of what happened back in 2010 and 2011 and understand the uniqueness of the current landscape under the pandemic. You may not want to hear any of that, or you may only want to hear certain parts of it. So I certainly will leave it up to you if you want to take 159, workforce development more broadly, et cetera.
I would like to, when you talk about weatherization, housing, broadband, I'd like to know on all of those fronts, it sounds like we're going to need significantly more workers. So I want to know, I don't, and I guess, in this context, I'm very
Yep.
concerned about the timing of it, because what I see in 159 is a lot of coursework at the Vermont State College system. I don't know how quickly that puts people on the ground working, and
Yes.
I want to know what the administration, if they share the same concern, and what is happening, and maybe what we can do in 159 to address them.
Actually, I think you just set that up really nicely, because we are looking at this and in two phases. One is the right now, and the second is what comes after the fall and the winter. And a lot of, I think, your conversation of the past week and some of the conversation we've had to have with the other committees about broadband workforce, et cetera, are really in the context of how do you build that workforce and fill that skills gap for the fall and the winter. And so the other phase is the right now. And I would actually define the right now as being now, today or yesterday, up until about September 4th. September 4th is when the UI benefits are set to expire under current laws and regulations. So there is a concern about what happens to the currently 35,000 people who are receiving benefits right now. How do we help access them as members of the workforce now? So I just want, one of the reasons why the department in our budget for 1.3 million for workforce development and training funds, and I can go through that if you'd like, but in our budget that seems to enjoy approval from both houses or both chambers at this point, that is continued work in training, workforce development, investments in CTE, credentials, certificates, et cetera. From the ground, I think it's our current view that when employers are looking for employees, that the problem isn't right now that there aren't enough people with the skills in their communities to take the jobs. There are other reasons why they aren't taking the jobs. And so thinking through what can the state do now to help people who aren't working become employed is a little bit of a different conversation than investments in building pipelines or occupational skills trainings to meet new needs as these investments in broadband and housing come to fruition.
So
I want to point out that
may I just tag you on that, because that goes directly to a number of concerns in this committee, which is what are we going to do to get workers back working? And so I sort of think we have to do a lot of this at the same time, because some of the programs, Mr. Chair, that the state colleges are proposing are short-term certificates. They're short-term trainings and upskillings. So I think that has to happen to get the workforce also on the ground by next year. But what I'd love to ask you, because you gave us a little teaser of it there, Mistress Buxton, is what could we propose now that would be an incentive to get people out off UI and back into the workforce? What support benefit what supports can we give them? What incentives could we give them to get them back working now between June and September 6th?
Mm-hmm. So support benefits are definitely a challenge. I guess I'm going to answer this carefully, because, as a part of the administration, we have our proposals, but what I can offer is that right now, if an individual is eligible for WIO, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, and they're on unemployment and they want to get back to work and they meet the eligibility standards, which often are barriers to employment, including being low income, we can right now offer that select group of people support payments as they're returning to work. So as they're becoming employed or just as on the cusp of seeking employment, we can offer to pay their rent. We can pay a cell phone bill. We can do a car payment. We can pay a child care bill. And I will note that those support payments are useful in current programs in helping individuals return to the workplace when they have other barriers. One of the things that I think we could use help on, and this isn't exact, I don't think this is what you're looking for, but I would be remiss if I didn't say this, is that there are a lot of existing resources out, and we don't have a mechanism or a separate source of funding to help inform Vermonters about what is available. So for example, right now, you can work up to, I think it's 30 hours a week, and your income, and still remain on unemployment, and your income can be disregarded, and you can still receive the additional benefits that the federal government provides. The way that that messaging is being conveyed is in an ad hoc or using existing resources basis. You know, it's on our webpage. There's information that we're giving job seekers in our weekly workshops. So creating information about what is currently available is important. Additionally, I want to highlight a program that you may, as you just noted, Senator, there are certificate programs that are quick and easy that people can access and get into the workforce if skills gap is an issue. We did an experiment last October with some of the funding that you had provided for us last year, and we set aside $150,000 and said that any Vermonter with a high school diploma could come to the Department of Labor and sign up to essentially get a voucher or a scholarship for $1,000 to enroll in any adult CTE certificate program, which could be from a CDL to LNA, phlebotomy, welding, including A to Z grant writing, right? Some of those small certificates. I'm surprised, despite our efforts to publicize this and push our staff to push this, we've only spent $56,000 to date. And so this pilot program ends in June. And I think there are other things that are causing people to be reluctant to move back into reemployment, whether it's fear of the pandemic or sickness or other things. If it is the UI benefit system, if it's schedules with dependent care or child care. I just want to be noteworthy that there won't be a silver bullet solution. And I don't want to say we shouldn't continue to fund those short-term certificates, but I want to make sure that you understand the current uptake is not really significant. But at the state college level a year ago, it was pretty significant.
They sold out that similar
that
program.
2.3 million.
And we spent 2.3 million upskilling people.
Yep.
And it was some of the best money I think we spent of our CRF dollars. So the curiosity is, why was the uptake so quick in the general public for that? But it was also tied as an opportunity to people who are on UI. But I think all of us are very keen on trying to, in addition to the workforce investment, and they're so tied, is an incentive, figuring out an incentive to get people back to work. And it could be skill, it could be further skills at birth. It could just be somehow a cash incentive to help with childcare or whatever it is that's the barrier to getting back to work.
So Sarah, we keep interrupting you and taking you into the weeds. Could you just give us your presentation of what you think we want to know?
Sure.
Sorry.
Yep. So for that's okay. So for H-159 in general, we support the bill. It wasn't ever designed to be a workforce development bill, so I'm a little reluctant to weed into areas of investment that aren't our purview. But I will say there's one part that we do oppose, and that is the study for the CTE restructuring piece. And if you want to know more about that, I can go down deep into the weeds. I'll tell you very briefly. We weren't asked to weigh in on this. However, it was a previously existing study that we had begun work on 2 years ago. And we had even gone so far as to issue the RFP. We selected the contractor. We were in the midst of contracting to do this structural work on where adult CTE should fit to be a more integrated system. And in June of last year, as that contract was ready to be signed, across the board, legislators and the administration said any dollars that can be saved from this year's budget needs to be reallocated to close the gap. So that work wasn't completed. And my testimony to you is that we support the work. However, because the state colleges are changing and because the education system is currently in flux, including adult literacy and the adult diploma program, we would ask that you delay initiating a restructuring conversation until the PK-12, including CTE system and the state college system have had a year to do recovery and restructuring, and then introduce the strategic planning consultation process. If you do decide to keep that section in, I can offer some changes to that section. And I've spoken with the Agency of Education, including some more areas of oversight, a budget for it, because the current dollars that were allocated come out of existing training funds. There was no new money for it. And I can offer you that language. But for now, both the Agency of Education and the Department of Labor are asking that we strike that work for this year, and would be very open to revisiting it next year when the two systems would be more able to come up with useful information on
Okay,
what
so,
the future.
I don't mean to interrupt, but we're
Yep.
running as usual short on time. So
Yep.
this is the $75,000.
That's the $75,000. Yeah.
Let's move on to bigger things than that. Okay. If you could put a section in this bill on workforce development and could get some money, do you have any ideas as to what you would add to this bill?
Yes. If you're following along, which I don't expect that you necessarily are, but on page 3, I put a snippet of what we had initially brought to the House several months ago.
That's why I apologize in advance.
That's okay.
I haven't read the memo, so
don't worry. Don't worry.
Go ahead.
No, you just got it a few hours ago, so don't worry.
It's on our website, and
Yes,
I'm on
Yep, I'm going to talk you through it. Don't worry.
Okay.
We had proposed $500,000 in what we were then calling the VDOL Jobs campaign. It was truly a conversation starter with the House, and it enjoyed support of the Commerce Committee, but it did not make it through the budget. There were a variety of uses that we had for this amount of money, which I think we're very open to having a conversation with you about what you've heard now, 4 months later, this week, about changing some of this. So some of the things that we think would be really important would be expanding the virtual services and connecting job seekers with employers, because this is about the immediate need. There's another section of the budget with 1.3 million, which both have agreed on, that invests in training, apprenticeships, etc. So this additional $500,000 is not considering the broadband investment of about, I think it's 150,000 that's already in the broadband bill, or I believe it's $1 million in weatherization workforce support that's in the weatherization, I forget which bill that is, but that's not part of this ask. This ask would be the placeholder for things that we could do right now to support connecting individuals with existing jobs. So I'm not really focused on upskilling in this section, because we have the $1.3 million to invest in upskilling and apprenticeships. And we have the prospect of many millions of dollars, hopefully before September, through the federal jobs bill that Congressman Welch's office has assured me last week is they believe we will see a lot of money for dislocated workers, support services, and all of those other things. So if we're going to pretend that money will be available by this fall, and we needed general fund dollars by July 1, I would say this bucket of money, which would include expanding virtual services, doing the outreach around everything from being able to work while you're on UI to linking them to the other investments in adult CTE, the certificate programs, etc. And then also lifting up special assistance for diverse worker recruitment. including some work around investing in, there's some, we spoke with Amazon, who is willing to make some free trainings available through CCV in cloud computing. And so we've initiated some conversations there around how we could offer some infrastructure around that curriculum, training the trainers and targeting specific communities, including new Americans and the BIPOC community, to help get them into the workforce more quickly with a few certificates in the cloud computing, cybersecurity, et cetera. If there are other ideas that you've heard this week that you think are, or some of the ideas that would be more important to get workers who don't necessarily need to be upskilled connected with employers now, this would be the pot of money that I think we could certainly work to develop a proposal.
Okay, so we're in a situation where we would have to make recommendations and get in Senate Appropriations Committee budget this week. We could continue to work on this bill and refine them in this bill, but we would sort of need an outline and a dollar figure to say that the Department of Labor supports this amount of money to use to allocate for immediate matching of workers with jobs, over the, the beginning of this next fiscal year. And I mean, this is a long shot in and of itself, but that would be the way we would have to go about it. We'd have to generally come up with some language and then get the Appropriations Committee to buy into that. And I don't know if there's any way we can use ARPA funds for any of this. That would make it a lot easier, probably, because there are a lot of moving parts in this bill that dollars can be potentially moved around without necessarily increasing the bottom line. Is it possible to use, as far as you know, to use ARPA funds for something?
We're proposing not to use the ARPA funds because the limitations that we've explored so far, I think you've heard many times, we still haven't gotten the guidance, but the types of funding that we would have that is more people-based or support services, et cetera, that has been one of the reasons why the administration has shifted to what we expect will be more allowable uses and offered this proposal to come from more general fund dollars. And I think that's where the administration is supporting a general fund investment in workforce at this stage, knowing that the next phase of federal dollars is going to be focused at dislocated workers, industry sectors, trainings, et cetera. And the guidance is likely to be much more forgiving for the types of uses that we would have.
Right.
And so I know you're under a tight timeline. If the committee has some feelings about how you would like to see the jobs campaign dollars used, I'm happy to work with one or any of you to try to put some structure around that package and represent it.
Is this jobs campaign idea generally outlined in this memo?
Yeah. It is, and it's outlined as a menu of options.
Page 3. Okay.
Yep. Okay. It's outlined as a menu of options that we had had conversations with the Commerce Committee, and at the time, in their swift moving schedule, they also hadn't honed in on which of the options they would prefer for the money to be used for. And so that's, I think, why appropriations couldn't make that direct case that day.
Right. Okay.
If you have an interest, I think we can narrow down that bulleted list to one or two items.
That would be great. Did you have language actually developed for these immediate needs?
Not legislative language, no, but I can help with that.
Yeah, that would be Great.
Let me just move on to one other thing before we, so we heard, I think, from the construction industry and from the building trades, the ability to create a few hundred new jobs with apprenticeship programs. What's the status with
Yeah.
the building trades and apprenticeship programs in Vermont in the Department of Labor right now? Do you give any resources to the building trades?
We do. We give through VTC. We stood up. They're federal dollars, so we stood up a construction apprenticeship program through VTC with some feeder programs in from the adult CTE systems. We are right in the middle of a modification for $690,000, which should be done within the next 10 days, to reallocate more funding to increase the number of apprenticeships in this field. So I feel pretty confident that there are dollars going to apprenticeships in the trades, and increasingly more, like tramway for ski lift inspectors, etc. What I would caution is that our conversations with some construction entities has been hit and miss. Some of them don't like the idea of an apprenticeship for a variety of reasons, but they love the idea of work and earn and learn at the same time. So with the Home Builders Association, we've recently had a conversation in concert with the Agency of Education about creating some new pipelines into those occupations. I'm warning those employers right now that is, if all they want is someone who will show up to the work site and throw a hammer and can learn how to tape off sheetrock in a room while they're on the job, then they don't necessarily need us to help them with an apprenticeship program now. But if they want to build pipelines into more skilled labor, that is something we would look for, that we could deliver on over the course of the summer and the fall and the winter. But I just wanted to be very clear that we're hearing from construction and hospitality. Those are the two loudest employer sector groups right now. We're hearing that they need people now. And if we can get someone to show up, they will hire them, and then they will train them as they go. And so I feel confident that there are investments that can be made, and using federal and existing state dollars into construction and other trades apprenticeships, and would probably circle those for additional investments with the federal jobs bill coming later this summer.
Well, what about this earn and learn thing right now? Is there any money that we can allocate in this 159 to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the options, even if we wanted to put some money at it, there is already an existing process of what we call OJTs, on the job trainings, where we reimburse an employer for up to 50% of their wage as they bring on. So they hire someone, and it may be someone they're taking a chance on, but we will reimburse for the first 6 or 8 weeks up to 50% of their wage to compensate them for what we know will be some additional time that their leadership teams will have to spend training a new employee. And that's a different type of a training process where you don't sit in a seat or learn something before you work. And it also has a little bit of a different impact in that it helps the employer in accessing and recruiting and affording the staff that they need right now to be able to meet their job orders in construction, for example.
We've heard about this before from you. I mean, this has been going on for a while. How many currently in the state are doing that? Because it strikes me that is a very popular thing to be doing.
Yes, so we can do it through 2 of our federal programs. One is the dislocated worker program, and the other is through the youth program. We've had very low uptake in the last few months. Well, I should say since the fall, in any of those programs, in part because of the pandemic. Now that companies are starting to hire again, this is really a tool we'd like to emphasize. The federal programs that we use to do the on-the-job training contracts with employers is limited by the individual's eligibility. And so if we were to make the state funds available to do the return to work on the job training, that would mean any person who was on unemployment, whether they have a special prioritized status or not, would be an eligible individual for an employer to hire. So it's an incentive for them to, if they have a choice in hiring, it makes them much more attractive. And it also relieves some burden from employers who are fearful of taking someone who may end up needing to leave the workplace sooner because they've made an upfront investment in them.
So I'm a little unclear, Sarah, as to you said something about the uptake for some of these programs. Those programs seem like they're in existence. There's money available if people come forward. I'm talking about something that we can invest new money in an idea. Maybe that's where you're saying that if you did state dollars, or I don't know if ARPA dollars would be appropriate. I mean, we have some disagreement on what to use ARPA for, but if you put those aside in this bill, you'd be creating a broadened eligibility for these programs and a broadened interest. So maybe you can get us an email by tomorrow morning with some ideas as to how to structure something like this to create, some a few hundred more jobs. Do you do anything with the union trades in terms of their apprenticeship programs? Yep.
IBEW, especially with the electrical and the plumbing apprenticeships. They are.
Do you give them financial support? How does that work?
No, for many years, we had stood up a program that was highly subsidized and still is, but I think now it's much more sustainable because it's grown so much. We have a very affordable program for the apprenticeships. Last year, the tuition was $900 a year. And so this year, I think we're going to use some of our federal dollars to offset the increase. So the employers typically pay for that training. Not all of them. Some of them have their apprentices pay, but the unions certainly have their employers pay for their apprentices.
So you don't have any connection to the union programs at all?
We do. We administer them. We administer the apprenticeship program, and there are union and non-union employers who both take advantage of the program equally. It used to be that the union administered it, and this was before my time, and there was a structured conversation, I believe, sometime in either the early 2010s or perhaps even before that, where they didn't want to administer the program anymore, or decided it would be more economical if they combined the administration of the because they were the same course content. And so the Department of Labor took it over, and now we now largely rely on VTC to administer the related instruction. And we give them a grant each year to support that work, and we negotiate the grant. But the benefit doesn't stem solely to unioned employees or unionized employees or
so
the
it goes to VTC, and they decide which programs to sub-grant it to, or to.
No, it's very specific. Just for we say which programs. It's the electrical program, and we estimate how many individuals will be in the program, what it will take. Right now, last year we had 700 participants sign up. I think by the end of the pandemic or of last year, it was about 600 that completed that year. So it's a pretty significant and probably one of the most successful apprenticeship programs that we have.
So the unions came in and said if they had more money for an additional instructor or something like that, they could train, dozens more people, but they're lacking, money.
We increase the number of instructors each year based on the class, the combined class sizes. I think we're up to 34 instructors. I don't think we necessarily have heard that there is increased demand that's going unmet. But part of the conversation each year with VTC is projecting what it will need to get those instructors. And we are, if they mean instructors just for their own internal trainings or their own additional components that aren't part of the apprenticeship program, that may be true, but I don't know that those exist anymore.
Well, we also had different testimony. We had VTC telling us they had 700 students in these apprenticeships, and
Yep, 700.
yeah. Union talking about way fewer. So
so the VTC program is the whole program. The union membership only constitutes a certain amount of that enrollment.
All right, if you can get us some ideas on paper in terms of some immediate, maybe low-hanging fruit to get people working sooner, like the on-the-job training subsidies and stuff like that, where we could put an appropriation section we might consider. Everything's moving so fast, and the more I hear, the more complicated this is, and I get this feeling this is not the way to legislate. But anyhow, we'll see what we can do. So thank you, both of you. We're going to move on to take 10 minutes with Karen Horn. And I'm sorry,
Alex does as well.
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't see anybody. Senator Brock, please.
Sarah, could you tell us what the administration's position is on H-159, sections 12 and 13?
12 and 13. That is that the higher ed?
No, it's the BIPOC.
Section 12 is BIPOC and section 13 is seed capital.
So when I checked in with my colleagues who oversee those programs and was told that the administration supports those proposals.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, in terms of immediate needs, I hear Sarah saying immediate needs, which would affect job seekers immediately, as the jobs campaign, 500,000, the broadening the eligibility on the job training. But I'm just curious, is there any incentive you see that would work to get people from UI back into jobs? Because you said the skills upskilling was not the issue.
Yes, it's usually that there's another barrier to employment. And if you wanted to follow the same line of reasoning in that we're using existing programs, but that current people are not eligible for, we could consider some line, although funds would have to be limited in some way, to select types of support payments once people are employed, so that if they needed to get their tires in order to get to a job, and that's what's keeping them on unemployment, not the actual like they want to work, but there's something else there. That's something that we're used to doing and we can do. If they're looking at that gap between being unemployed and becoming employed. So if that is of interest to you, it's helpful for me to know what you're looking for the most, and then we can kind of structure that all within the 500,000 bucket.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, because I think one of the areas of real interest on this committee has been how can we incent people to get back to work, and anything we can do that's either currently available but not well marketed. I mean, it sounds like there's so many opportunities here that are not well marketed, that people aren't.
I think working part-time is like, I don't understand how many people can look at that opportunity to still stay on unemployment benefits and work a select number of hours and have your wages. I think the legislature changed that 10 years ago, and you increase the income disregard up to like, I don't know, it's at least 50%. So that income disregard is really key. And I don't think people understand that it's a pretty rich opportunity.
Senator Ron, did you have a question? Maybe not. Okay. We're going to move on to hear one last piece of this puzzle of 159. That's from, well, maybe it's not part of 159. It has to do with the community community needs from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Um, and Karen submitted a memo. I have not had a chance to read it, but maybe you can. Thank you, Sarah and Dustin, for being here. A lot to think about in
Thank you.
a little, very short time.
Yeah, sure.
So, Karen, welcome. If you can take 10 minutes and just tell us what's going on this appropriation request.
Okay, thank you, Senator, and thank you for having me. So I believe that this is actually framed in the context of H-159. And I've had the opportunity to do my homework from last week.
Right.
So we're talking about the Working Communities Challenge, which was a program that was stood up by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. And it's based on Working Cities Challenge, which is a program they have in other states with larger jurisdictions. So the Working Communities Challenge this past year funded, they had 15 applications from municipalities, both individually and groups of municipalities around the state. There were 8 finalists, and 4 of them were chosen initially, and those 4 are Greater Barrie, Lamoille, I'm sorry, those are not the 4 that were initially granted the funds. The ones that there were an additional 4 out of the 8 that the Federal Reserve Bank and its partners wanted to fund, and those were Greater Barrie, Lamoille County, the Springfield area, and Winooski. And I do have the towns that are included in those 4 groups. But the idea really is that across sectors, you would be building civic leadership and the capabilities in those under-resourced areas to build sustainable futures. So across sectors like municipal, private sector, nonprofit, state, like a consortium of groups that would address a multitude of issues. The governor's budget proposal would use $3 million in ARPA investment, in ARPA funds, to expand to those 4 additional communities. And the idea is that each of the communities would receive 3 years of Working Community Challenge grants, plus coaching, technical assistance, management by the Boston Fed, and support to achieve system change goals. I'll just tell you who's in the sort of what the specific projects are in those 4 areas. In the Northwest, which includes Grand Isle and Franklin counties, we're talking about improving individual stability, skills and success in employment by generating long-term change to workforce challenges, housing, transportation, childcare, and substance use. And then, and each of these 4 groups have priority communities. So in Franklin and Grand Isle County, the priority communities are St. Albans City and Enosburg, and I think that that's where they are considering centering those efforts. And then the second one is the Northeast Kingdom.
Can I interrupt for a second? Who does the
Yeah,
money,
sure.
in Franklin County, for instance, what entity does the money go to? And how much would go there over 3 years?
So the, let's see. So it's a total of $3 million. 2 million and change would be in direct grants to the 4 groups of communities, 505,000 each, which includes implementation and tactical grants. 300,000 in Vermont Council on Rural Development, coaching and technical assistance, 75,000 to each of the 4 communities. 320,000 in evaluation to track progress. This is in the document that I forwarded to you,
Right.
so apologies for
But who does it go to?
reading.
Does it go to the mayor of St. Albans? Who does it?
No, I believe that it would go to there has to be a lead entity. You're absolutely right. There has to be a lead entity. Wouldn't necessarily be a municipality. And in a couple of these instances, Steve Michon, who's with the Boston Fed, told me they're still trying to finalize who would be the entity to receive funds and sort of be the administrator for the programs. They started those discussions, and then I believe they stopped them for a little bit, and now they're starting them up again.
Could you?
And if
could
you want, I know you don't have a lot of time, Senator, but Steve might be a good person to talk to about this particular aspect of it.
I guess the question that I've had on this program is, it seems the $3 million in ARPA funds that the governor is asking for 4 communities is more than the amount of money that was granted to the 4 communities that won the award. That's one question. And the second question is, I don't understand in the first instance of the 4s that were granted, does the Federal Reserve Bank, they're the ones that give the money and they provide technical and administrative support. In this case, the state of Vermont gives the money, but the Bank of Boston, even though they're not associated with the money anymore, are still willing to give technical and administrative support. That's what I'm not getting.
So let me try to clarify a little bit. The Boston Fed, and I will mention that, not to call her out, but Senator Ballant is on the steering committee for Vermont. And I understand she has had legislative responsibilities recently, so hasn't been involved in conversations just currently. But my understanding is that the Boston Fed does not actually provide any money. Like, there's no money from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston going to these projects. What they have done is gathered funds from a variety of sources that are then granted to those communities that receive the grants. So, and the idea is now, and they were able to fund 4 via that revenue stream. And so the idea now is that they would like to address the additional 4 finalists, and that money would come from the ARPA funds.
So once the Federal Reserve Bank gives the money over to the successful grantees, what is their continuing role?
The Federal Reserve Bank will continue to staff and manage and support the Working Communities Challenge grants under the guidance of this 18-person Vermont-based steering committee. Ted Brady's on that as well, which is where your initial request for testimony came from.
Right.
And obviously there's a number of other people on that steering committee as well. I could send that to you. But my understanding is it's the Fed that actually sort of coordinates and manages and has this dedicated staff person to work with these communities that received the funds.
So
To-
anybody in any state, to the extent they can raise money, can go to the feds and say, even though I didn't win the grant, I didn't make the last cut of the grant that you supported, I've got my own money, so help me out and support me spend my own money.
Well, you would need to have a project that fit the criteria of the Working Communities Challenge program. I think what the Fed and the steering committee and the administration is thinking is that these 4 communities, Greater Barre, Lamoille, Springfield, and Winooski areas, are distressed parts of the state and do
They
need
got-
the.
They got the grant. Those are the 4 that got it. It's the 4 that, and what they got it for, Michael, are things, the Springfield area got it for increasing workforce participation by matching unemployed residents with quality jobs and matching underemployed workers with quality jobs that meet their skill level. And the partners were amazing. You know, they were, and they, I assume, are charged with carrying this out. And it's everything from the Springfield Regional Development Corp to the Restorative Justice Center. But I don't know how much they got. When you said this is proposing that the 4 that might get it in through this money, I don't see here how much they actually got.
I saw that the ones that were granted got a total of somewhere a little bit over $2 million. And this is calling for the unsuccessful applicants to get $3 million.
Right.
So are you saying that the Reserve Bank raises money through corporations or other places, and they have this fund that they give out money for these kinds of purposes and provide some backup technical assistance and administrative support? And what we're doing here is we're trying to plug into their program with our own money?
That is essentially what we're talking about. The Boston Fed has been able to bring in some big donors for their program overall. Some of the larger foundations that don't generally spend money in Vermont, for instance. So I think I could get you a list of who all those funders were. Might take me a little bit of time.
That's okay. But what you could help me with, and maybe we have it already, is you can just send us a link about this Community Challenge Grant Program, so we can
Sure.
read about what the Boston Fed is promoting.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'll do that when I get off the call.
Okay. I don't know if other people have questions, or there's a lot more you'd like to say. I think we get the gist of it. And
Well, I wonder if you'd like to hear who's in these other 4 groups that are being under consideration now.
the 4 towns or the 4 regions?
Well,
Regions.
the 4 regions
Yes.
that so the Northwest is Grand Isle and Franklin counties, and the priority communities are St. Albans City and Enosburg. The Northeast Kingdom, which is going to address social and infrastructure, tackling intergenerational poverty, includes Orleans, Essex, and Caledonia counties, and the priority communities are Barton, Linden, Newport, and St. Jay. And then number 3 is Southern Vermont, which is Windham and Bennington counties. And they're going to be focusing on new Americans, attracting new Americans and supporting new Americans coming into those areas to welcome, it says 1,000 legal immigrants and 5,000 other diverse migrants to the region. And the priority communities there are Rockingham, Putney, and Westminster. And actually, I'm going to send you this as well, Senator, because it does say who's the administrator for the teams in some of these. And then the fourth one is White River Valley. And that includes a bunch of towns: Bethel, Braintree, Brookfield, Chelsea, Randolph, Rochester, Pittsfield, Stockbridge, Tunbridge, Sharon, Royalton, Hancock, and Stratford. I'm not exactly sure how they came up with that group of towns. I think they reached out to towns that were interested in being part of it. And the priority communities for that group are Randolph and Royalton.
Okay.
So I'll send you this. It's a PowerPoint, but I'll send it to you anyway.
Okay, that's good. That helps understand this a lot better. Do you know if there are any metrics to show success, or is anybody going to audit what's being done with this $3 million?
Well, yeah, that is part of the function of the Boston Fed, also to assure that funds are spent for the purposes that they're granted for, and that the funders that have donated dollars, private, state, nonprofit, understand what they're getting for their money.
Good. Okay. I would expect they would want to know, as would we, what we're getting for our money.
Yes.
So, okay. Well, thank you for hanging in there. Sorry we caught you off guard the first time around, but you did a very admirable job this time around.
Thank you.
And the time frame on these? What is the time frame? Just immediate
3 years.
on the communities that are getting the money? Have they already gotten it?
Oh, I will have to find out for you. I don't believe so, but I am not sure about that.
Okay. Well, thank you for committee for hanging in here. What we're going to do tomorrow is try and get a chart together of the decision points on 159 and the budget, and we'll start talking about that. I'll try and get a better idea of when Jane wants our recommendations, but I'm afraid it's probably going to be probably first thing Friday morning. I think they want to plug in some of our numbers if they agree with them on Friday afternoon. I think there will be time after those go over for some adjustments, maybe not so much on the numbers, but maybe on some language, if we have any language we're looking forward to. But we've got all the things that are in 159 and things that are in the House budget and the ARPA spending to look at. So a quick list of what I have in front of me now. Under ARPA, the House put in $3 million to UVM for the Office of Engagement and Technological Economic Development, $2 million for micro business and embrace grants, $5 million for Better Places, tourism marketing, $2.5 million, BIPOC, $100,000. The governor's proposal for FY22 is $50 million on economic recovery grants, $5 million on outdoor recreation and trails, $3 million on this community challenge grant, and $22 million on the capital grants. That's just in 22. It's in 22. It is for 22 also, but then that gets extended each year out. All three of those, 5, 3, and 22, for a total of 30, get funded for 3 years. And then we have general fund items of the Montreal Trade Office of 300,000. Seed capital program, which is in 159, is 900,000, and there's 200,000 for micro businesses for technical assistance, and that's the list of things that. Hold on, there may be more. They've asked.
There's,
Senator Mitchell asked me whether we want to do anything more on youth employment, and also we need to find a home for our $1 million for remote and relocated workers, and I think the downtown tax credit, the increase of 1.75 million is in trouble. Senator Kitchell doesn't want to do that because it's a base builder. I'm not exactly sure how she has jurisdiction over that, but she has jurisdiction over a lot of things. So there's some talk in the House of like taking that 175, maybe lowering it and doing it with one-time money over a couple of years, sort of as a pilot, and dedicated it to neighborhood development areas to get that broadening in place. So I will try and send a memo out tonight with all these things for you folks, so you'll have it for tomorrow. And I think we have most of the morning open tomorrow to talk about these things.
Can I just say, Mr. Chair, I definitely perked up when you said youth employment. It may be a passion of people on the committee as well. It's certainly a passion of mine, and I have some thoughts and ideas if they want to be thinking about that. It's heartening to hear that Senator Mitchell is asking for those ideas, so I can come prepared tomorrow with some thoughts.
well,
Okay. One of the places where we've put money in the past has been VYCC. Is that what it's called?
yeah,
Yep.
it's been a passion of this committee's for, it's been we have steadily supported it and feel pretty strongly about it, I think. It's a workforce.
I was hoping to figure out a way to get more money into apprenticeship program, but what I heard today